Once again, I'm back today, and we're going to be talking about some good stuff today. I did have a guest that was going to come on today, but some things happened at the last minute. Everyone who knows being an entrepreneur, anything can come up. So today we're going to talk about, like I said, how to structure my business. So, like I said, I want to welcome everyone to today's show. And in previous shows, we've gone over a lot of information and a lot of good points. When it comes to the business, we talked about, marketing, branding, perfectionism, just to really name a few of those. But today's topic to me is really one that we probably should have discussed a little earlier on, but nevertheless, we're going to talk about it today. So, for those who don't really know, I am a tax accountant, and so I am in the tax business as well. And I kind of get this question all the time for those individuals looking to start their business or just starting out and everything like that. How should I structure my business, or how should I set up my business? And I kind of tell them all the time, I can't really answer that question for you. I was reading an article just the other day, and it had a great point on there. And the question that article really asked was, what's your tolerance level, or your tolerance for the risk of your personal assets? And I think that's a great question. And I think about the answer to that question, that should really tell you how you want to set up your business or the structure in which you want to use. So we're going to kind of dive into a couple of them, the main ones that the average person would use nowadays, starting with like sole proprietor. Then you have partnerships, you have the limited liability companies, and then you have the corporations. So, all of these are great structures and great setups for any company or any individual. But, like I said, I can't really answer that question for you. Each one of these carries their own limited amount of liability on your personal assets. So once again, I'll refer back to that question where we talk about what's your tolerance for risk to your personal assets. So growing up, I remember my parents, they, when we had the trucking company early on, it was set up as a sole proprietor. And, they would run the business normally, everything like that. It was a great setup for them during that time, but the only real downside to me was that everything was guaranteed by their personal credit or the cash that they had on hand because it was a sole proprietor. So like I said, when you think about those, you just got to think about what's really going to be the best thing for you. So I remember I think my parents had already been in business probably about 15 years when, I finally came along and said, what, we need to change up how we're actually going to do this. So in doing that, we went in and we looked at the best structure for that business. It was a waste management company. But we looked at it. We looked at the limited liability company. We looked at, the corporations. We looked at partnerships, everything like that. And we really figured out that the best structure for that company at that time was going to be to incorporate the company. And what we did, we set up an S corp to as a structure for that company. And I must say it was one of the best things that we did, after we did it, because it gave us that opportunity to go in and kind of continue on and growing that business without personally being liable for everything that our own personal assets of that company. So, and I talk about that all the time. And the one example that I talk about with my parents as far as when they first started out being a sole proprietor, let me give you this example. Let's just say that you have a courier company, right? And, one day you're out, you're driving that company vehicle and making deliveries and everything like that, and you get into an accident. Now, your structure is set up that you're a sole proprietor. And this is kind of one of the downsides to being just a sole proprietor is that, when you get into that accident, anything that you have personally becomes liable if someone decides to sue you because of that accident. So that, like I said, that's why we asked that question right there. What's your tolerance for risk to your personal assets? So that's why over the years they've come up with different entities and things like that, as far as how you want to set up, what you're going to set up, and how you're going to go about setting those up. So like I said, we're just going to talk about a few of them here today. But, I gave you a little spill as far as the sole proprietor goes. To me, that is one of the easiest structures because you have the most flexibility with it, and it's simple to operate and form. I mean, it's less legal control when it comes to, the sole proprietor. But like I said, the downside of it is that all the liability falls on you, the owner or the owners. So, great structure, but once again, do you want to be fully liable for for your own personal assets when it comes to that? So, but the other one I wanted to touch base on is actually a partnership. And, the partnership, it's similar to the sole proprietor. It's just that you bring in a partner most times, which is someone that you're not married to. And when you bring that person in, basically, you guys become personally liable, split 50-50 for everything that goes on within the company. So, partnership is another way to set up everything. But what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break right here. And when we come back, we're going to continue talking about how to structure my business. So you're listening to Let's Get Down to Business. Once again, I'm your host, Coach Sash, and you're tuned into WDRBmedia, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. We'll be right back. To sole proprietors, if you don't actually set up the company for the partnership, the only thing about, the actual partnership is that, it's pretty much still an unincorporated business. It's owned by multiple owners. And basically the debts, the assets, the profits, and the loss of the company, they're split pretty much 50-50 unless you kind of divide it up in a different way. But in most general cases, it's going to be 50-50. So, not a lot of protection there for that company as far as, when it comes to the individuals, you're liable 50-50 on that. But, when it comes to protecting your personal assets, still not a lot of protection there. So, a lot of people enter into partnerships for different reasons. One partner may be strong in one thing and the other partner strong in another, but when they put together, they equal 100% of everything that they need. Great concept, great setup, but what you're looking for in today's time, and honestly, is just really, you want the protection of your personal assets. So we're going to move from partnership and we're going to jump into the limited liability company. And if you really look at the name of it, that's exactly what it is. It's most people nowadays, they reference it as just a LLC, but it's the correct title is a limited liability company. And, it's just that it limits the liability for you as the owner of the business. So I think this is one of the most popular ones in today's time, only because it's super easy to set up. It doesn't have as many restrictions and controls as far as as management, as far as corporations go. You can do it pretty much in any state. You can set up an LLC in any state. But, like I said, it limits the personal liability of its owners, which are, in this case, they're called members or member managers. Like a corporation, it's going to be all of the profits and losses are going to be divvied up to whoever the owners are. And even in the limited liability company, you can have just one individual or you can have multiple individuals, and this is what I was just referring to a second ago when we talked about, wanting some form of protection, even when you create a partnership. See, you can go in and form an LLC and create a partnership within that LLC. But what it does for you, it protects you personally and just puts everything back on the company. So once again, when you talk about wanting to protect yourself or limit your liability when it comes to your personal assets of a company, the first start is going to be, like I said, the limited liability company. And I think here in North Carolina, if you want to set up a limited liability company, it roughly is going to run you anywhere from $200 all the way up to about maybe $500, just depending on if you do it yourself versus allowing someone to do it for you. It's very easy. I get that question all the time. Can I help someone set it up? And I've done it really in the past, to be honest. I've helped some people out where I really just do it for free because it's just that easy sometimes. But I know sometimes what can seem very easy to me because I do it all the time can sometimes get difficult to another. So if that's something that you are interested in doing, make sure that you do visit right here in North Carolina. Just visit the North Carolina Secretary of State website, and they can give you a starting point for doing it. And like I said, it's very simple. So like I said, that's discussing the limited liability company. Like I said, we talked about creating a partnership within that limited liability company. You can have multiple owners within that limited liability company. You kind of get that protection that you need without going all the way as far as the corporation goes. And we're going to jump into a corporation here in a second. Because once we start talking about corporations, there's different forms of corporations. So, some people I know, when you talk about the LLC, they'll call it a hybrid company. And basically just saying a kind of in between your personal versus, having that protection there, which is, you'll hear it talked about that way as well. But like I said, this is just the start of, limiting your liability when it comes to things. So once again, we're back to that same question there. What's your tolerance for risk when it comes to protecting your personal assets? So make sure that you do your research on that. And like I said, see which one's going to be best for you. Personally, I know I own a LLC. And so it works great for one of the companies that I have is a real estate investment company. So with that company right there, that's set up as a LLC, and it works great for that right there because once again, I don't have to go as to the extreme and be the corporation, but it allows me the protection when I have those properties that to where I'm not personally liable for, let's just say if I'm renting one of those properties out and it's a residential property and someone has an accident or something like that in the property or something like that, what that does for me personally, it limits my personal liability. It takes on the company itself takes on the risk, but you still need insurance. Let's be clear about that too. But it limits me personally from someone coming after my personal assets, meaning my personal home, my personal vehicle, my personal bank accounts, things of that nature. It limits someone from actually being able to access those if something was to come about in the form of a lawsuit or something like that. So I love limited liability companies. Like I said, they're super easy to set up. They're great. It's not as much you have a lot more flexibility when it comes to the management styles of a LLC. And so, that's one of the best ones that I know of. And like I said, we're going to keep going here in a second. We're going to jump into some of the other ones also. So you got any questions on that? Like I said, make sure you can visit my website, sashcoaching.net, and hit me up and I can answer any questions that you may have on that. But what we're going to do now, we're going to take a quick break here. And so once we come back from the break, we're going to dive back into the other forms of structuring your business and everything like that. So that's kind of what we've been talking about today. So once again, you're listening to Let's Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Coach Sash. You're tuned in to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. We'll be right back.
It looks like it's about to rain.
Yeah, did you go now? Like, nope, it's not working. I gotta shake the whole thing.
Yep.
Right. In 3, 2.
Welcome back to WDRBmedia, the voice of the community, and those streaming live through free TuneIn Radio app and through iHeartRadio. You're listening to Let's Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Coach Sash. If you're just tuning in, we've been talking about how to structure my business or the best structure for my business. Once again, like I said early on, I can't really answer that question for you. You have to kind of figure it out for yourself, which one's going to work best for you. But like I said, in an article that I was reading, it asked that number one question: what's your tolerance for risk to your personal assets? So once again, if you haven't picked up the book yet, it's called Let's Get Down to Business, Lessons of a Serial Entrepreneur. Available on my website, sashcoaching.net, amazon.com, as well as barnesandnoble.com. Make sure you go out and pick up one of those. All right, so we're going to jump back into the different structures here. So before we left off, we got into limited liability as far as company partnerships and multiple owners within. So now we're going to move into corporations. We saved the best for last. So with this one right here, corporations. Now, to me, when I hear the word corporation, I think about this is my best protection as far as my personal assets go when it comes to setting up the structure of my business, because the corporation itself, it's always going to be its own separate entity. It's going to have its own tax ID number. It's going to have its own heading. Like the corporation itself, that's going to be one of your best forms of protection when it comes to setting up the business. Because like I said, it's really on its own. But under corporations, we're going to talk about two of the main setups for your corporation, which is a S Corp and a C Corp. And I'm not going to bore you with what those codes really mean, because they're really subchapters within the IRS internal revenue, the internal revenue codes, meaning a subchapter C or a subchapter S. But I'm going to do my best here to kind of explain them in the simplest form. So when I think about the C Corp, which most people will refer to it as, that one right there really is its own separate entity. But what it is, it's an entity that all of the profits of the business remain in the business. Sometimes you may hear a flow-through entity or something like that. With a C Corp, it's not a flow-through entity. All of the profits, the debts and everything and assets of that company remain within that company. And how those are kind of given out, they're given out in dividends and disbursements of that way. So, it's not really a flow-through entity. But, when you think about the strongest, protection, C Corp is going to be the strongest one. But when we talked about earlier, flexibility in management and all of that, there's not a lot of flexibility when it comes to managing in a C Corp, because you have to have annual meetings. You have to take minutes at those meetings. You have to have a board of directors, and everyone has to be liable to that company for what's going on in that company. So, a lot of people are like, okay, I want to set up a corporation, and, not really understanding which one they want to do. I would say, if you're not really ready to go down that path of managing a C Corp, that might be one that you kind of want to steer away from for right now. And the greatest thing about all of them is that no matter which one you set up today, you can always go back and change it later on. So don't get so tied up with, I got to choose the right one today. You can start off with an LLC, and later on you can convert it to a corporation at any time. So, you don't have to get caught up in that right there. But, like I said, when it comes to the C Corp, that's going to give you your strongest protection of your personal assets right there, because, like I said, it's its own separate entity. That company right there stands by itself. If that company wants cars, or if it wants, to go out and lease buildings, purchase real estate, everything like that, that company is going to go out and do that on its own. Now, you're going to have to sign for it, being the officer of the company, but that's where that's going to lie with that company. Now, when you think about the C Corps too, a lot of the C Corps really are a lot of your larger organizations, just because of the complexity of managing that type of corporation. So, that may not be the best one for someone that's starting out in a small business, but it's a great entity or a great structure for your business, but it may not be the best one for someone who's just starting out as far as a small business goes. Sometimes they're used by a lot of larger corporations and larger companies. So let's look at the S Corp. Once again, not going to bore you with the Internal Revenue Code for that. Like I said, most times you hear it, you're going to hear it called the S Corp, but it's really S Corporation, and sometimes it's even referred to as a flow-through entity. So you can actually go in as one individual and set up a S Corp if you want to. Once again, that S Corp is going to be its own separate entity from you, has its own tax ID number, it's going to have its own name, it's going to stand alone by itself. But the greatest difference between the C Corp and the S Corp is that the profits and the loss from the business are going to be dispersed to the owners of that company. And, in most cases, how that comes to you is in Form 1120, so I'm not going to bore you with that either, but those are all tax forms right there, but it's going to come to you right there. And that's what you actually get to put on your personal tax return. So let's just say the S Corp. Let's say you started that business today. We're going to use nice round numbers. You started that company today, and, in the first year, you had a loss of, let's just say, $50,000. Now, your personal return, let's just say you're working another W-2 job and everything like that while you're getting your business up and off the ground. What's going to happen when that S Corp goes to file its tax return? They're going to give you what's called the K-1. And that K-1 is going to have all of your personal information on it. And with that K-1, what you're going to do is attach that to your personal tax return. And the losses, that $50,000 loss that flowed through that S Corp, guess what? It's going to end up on your personal tax return, bringing down your total tax liability. That's why a lot of people love the S Corporation. Now, as far as flexibility in management, it's not a lot of flexibility in management. It's still some of the same things. You got to take minutes. You need to have annual meetings, but the flexibility there is, once again, it's a flow-through entity. And even with this right here, you can treat it almost like a partnership to where you have percentages on which owner has what. You can set up a 50-50, a 60-40, a 30-70, whichever you prefer. So, S Corps are great. Like I said, you may hear them referred to as, flow-through entities. So once again, that's on the North Carolina Secretary of State website. Those are a little more complex to set up. If you're not really familiar with them, I would say you probably want to get some help doing those. But, once again, it's a great structure and one of the best ones that I do know out there. So I hope that all of this information has been helpful for you today. Once again, if you have any questions or concerns for myself, you can visit my website, sashcoaching.net, send me a message, and I'll be sure to get back to you with any questions that you may have. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and be sure to follow me on Facebook at Coach Sash and on Twitter at Coach Sash. And remember, procrastination won't get you to your destination. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.